Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you about the occupational therapy admissions interview. So I'm mostly going to cover what are some common occupational therapy questions that you might be asked during the interview, what are some potential questions that you can ask the school that you're interviewing at, and then just a trick that really helped me during the admissions process. All right, so first I'm going to start off with some common occupational therapy admissions interview questions. Now, I personally interviewed at 3 different schools, so the questions that I'm giving you are questions that either I heard at all the schools or at least 2 of the schools, or that even if I didn't hear them in my personal interviews, I know from reading other people's interview experiences that these are common occupational therapy interview questions that I'm going to be giving you. So the first one that is definitely a question that you're going to most likely get, it's probably at almost every single interview, is how would you define occupational therapy to a friend? Because most programs want to make sure that you know what occupational therapy actually is and that you're getting into something that you have a clear understanding about so that they don't waste their time on you. That sounds really harsh, but I think, they don't want to admit someone who doesn't actually understand what they're getting into. So that's really an important question. And this question, it's so easy because if you know that you want to do occupational therapy, you've had to do your hours of observation, you've done your prerequisites, that sort of thing. You probably really understand what occupational therapy is, but at the same time, it's such a hard question to state in a concise statement. So I would definitely practice this one because it's one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, I know what occupational therapy is. I could tell it to you. And then you go to actually explain it and you realize just how complex the answer is and how difficult it can be to really just describe to someone in simple terms in a short statement what occupational therapy is. So I'll go ahead and I'll definitely practice that question. Another question that's very common is specifically, why would you like to attend this program? So I would make sure, because I know when I went into my interview, I had selected my schools probably 6, 8 months before. So I really, before the interview, needed to brush up on why did I actually decide that I wanted to apply to this school. So I would recommend, even if you definitely knew that you had a reason to go to this school and to interview at this school, just go ahead and kind of brush up, go back to the school's website and see specifically what drew you to this program in the first place, because you don't want to get there and be like, man, I knew there are things that I really like about this program, but I don't remember what they are. So go ahead, definitely kind of re-research, re-remember kind of what you liked about the program. Other questions that I was asked at most schools, or that I know are common questions, are things like, how will you handle the difficult workload? So graduate programs are more complicated than undergrad, or they're supposed to be. I mean, I haven't been in one, but that's what you hear. So they want to make sure that you're going to make it through the program and that you're not just going to drop out. Because if you're going to drop out, they'd rather give that space to someone else. So they really want to know, how are you going to handle the workload? Another question I know that I got was, how do you work in a group, and what are some conflicts you might have had in a group, and how did you resolve those conflicts, that sort of thing, because there's a lot of collaboration within occupational therapy programs, and they want to make sure that you're going to be able to work through that and they're not going to have a lot of drama. I think that's why the question's there, at least. And then another question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I think that I only had this at one interview, but it's still an important one to prepare for. I think I've heard that other people have had that question, so I would, make sure that you have at least 1 or 2 strengths and 1 or 2 weaknesses that you can share. And then another one is diversity. How do you handle diversity? What are your experiences with diversity? What does diversity mean to you? That sort of question. I don't remember exactly how that was worded, but I do know that I got asked that question at 2 of my different interviews, just kind of how I handle diversity and what are my experiences with diversity. So those are the questions that I came across that were pretty common for me, or that I've seen that other people have had, and I've seen the question come up a lot from other people's experience. So I would definitely recommend preparing for those questions specifically. Now, there are other questions that definitely might come up to your school, so I would suggest Googling maybe your school name and admissions questions, because you never know, somebody might have posted previous year's admissions questions. I've definitely seen that before. So if you want to kind of get more inside tips on what your school might specifically ask, I would definitely recommend kind of Googling the school name, and you might be able to find some more specific questions for your school. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about are some potential questions that you can ask the school that you're interviewing at. Now, these are very generic questions. I didn't do any school-specific questions because, of course, I don't know what schools you're interested in, so that would be kind of silly for me to do. But these are just generic questions. I would recommend also having some school-specific questions. But in case you can't think of any questions, or in case you get in the situation where you go into the interview and they answer all your school-specific questions before you get to the part where they ask you if you have any questions, these are ones that you can pull out of your back pocket, and that should work for every school. So the first question that I have is, how does a program make up for any weaknesses that it might have? So even the best programs are going to have areas that they're just not as strong in. And I think, one, this question is great because it kind of tells you what those weaknesses are, and then it also gives you information on how does the school make up for that, so you kind of have an idea. If the school doesn't make up for any of its weaknesses, I think that says something about a program. So that's a great question, just for you to have that knowledge, and I think it's also a generic question that shows that you're interested. Another question that I have is, how involved are the alumni? And that, I think, really speaks to a program and the quality of a program, because if you have a lot of alumni that are setting up field works and are really trying to help the next group of occupational therapy students at that school, I think it just shows that they really enjoyed their experience, they really felt like they had a great experience, and therefore they want to contribute to that school and they want to help other students have the same experience they had. So I think that that's just a great question that really speaks to the quality of the program. Another question, if you're interested in the AOTA National Conference, is if the school helps students go, if there's a way for students to get time off or to get financial help with attending the conference. That's just if you're interested in that knowledge. That's a great question. And then what's my last question? My last question is, and this is really my favorite question. I love asking this question because so many programs really don't have a great answer for this, and this is something that I think is so important to know as a student going into a program, is, especially if you're planning on working in certain areas, is how does a program prepare you in case you're going to work with clients that have low budgets and really don't have the means to buy fancy equipment? How does the school prepare you? Is it just that they're going to tell you, oh, write grants and do this? Or are they really going to teach you various techniques that are going to save you and your client money, different materials you can use, and how you can kind of work around budget constraints? So that question I love asking. I think it really just it's interesting to see how the schools respond, and a lot of schools really don't have a great answer, at least in my experience, but I think that's good to know, because if you really want to work in a low budget area or an area that's impoverished, it's important to know, are you going to be prepared for that situation post-graduation? And also, just even if you aren't planning on going into an area that is going to be a low income area, I think it's important to know what are some low budget techniques anyway, so that it's saving you and your client money, and that's always a great thing. Lastly, I just wanted to share with you a trick that I used when I went through the interview process that personally helped me be a little bit more confident when I went into the actual interview. So for me, I was already planning on bringing in some sort of writing utensil and paper, because I just wanted to be able to jot down notes in case they said something that I wanted to research later. And really, honestly, because I had multiple interviews, to just kind of remind myself what I liked about kind of how they responded, so that afterwards I could refer back to that. So I already was planning on bringing it in a notebook type thing. So what I did is I had a pad paper similar to this. So I had this sort of paper, and I put it in a nicer folder. It's not like I just walked in with this, but I had this type of paper and I put it in a folder. And what I decided to do, for me, what I really actually would recommend that you do if you're interested, and if this is something that would help you, is either you can do it on like the second or third page, or you can do it at the end. And the reason I'm saying not to do it at the very beginning is because you don't really want to walk in with paper that has a bunch of writing on it. But what I did is I went to the last page, and this is just an example one. This isn't the exact one that I brought in, but I just kind of made it up real quickly to show you what I did. Is on the back of it, I wrote down, so here's my notebook paper, and I wrote down here, if you look, I wrote potential interview questions. So I just wrote out, for me, I literally wrote down the questions I wanted to ask the school. And the reason that I think it's nice to do this is because if you get in there and you're at the interview and you're like really just understanding what they're saying and everything, and you get to the end and you're like, shoot, what was I gonna ask them? You can always, just flip back to the end, and if it's at the end, it's a really easy place, you know where it is, or 2 pages in, that's also easy, you know where to find it. You don't want it to be somewhere stuck in the middle, yet it still gives you that clean appearance on the front, like you don't have it written there. But this way you can just flip back and be like, oh, just 1 second, I had a couple questions. Just flip it open and be like, oh, I wanted to know, and whatever you wrote down. The other thing that I had is, if you look a little bit further down here, is I wrote down some, I actually wrote out interview questions, and I wrote what my response was. So this kind of felt silly when I was doing it, but I wrote down, for example, this one right here is, how will I handle the workload? And I just wrote down what my answer would be in the most eloquent way that I could think of. Because honestly, you might go in there, and even if you've prepared, if you're extremely nervous or who knows what, you might get in there and you might just totally blank on what you were going to answer. And as embarrassing as it might be to have to flip back and be like, I'm not 100% sure, can I just have a second to think about it, and then to just look back, that's definitely embarrassing, but it's better than honestly going in there and having no clue, no idea what you should do. So this is something that I did that I would totally recommend to somebody, and honestly, I didn't even have to use it, because I think just going through the process of writing it out and having to brainstorm and really consolidate and condense what I was going to say and put it in the best words, just having to go through that process, I think, really helped me prepare for the interview, so I never even had to look at it. But I also felt just so confident going into the interview, knowing they weren't going to stump me, because I had the answer written down. So even if I couldn't remember and I blanked, I could always reference it. So that's just something I think is super helpful. I would totally recommend it. I just think that it makes you feel more confident. It makes you feel more comfortable. And honestly, what harm does it do? It takes a few minutes. You jot it down, and they're never going to know if you don't reference it. They can't see it. So I just think it's a great way to just feel a little bit more confident and a little bit more prepared.